Welcome everyone to this meeting on January the 27th, sorry, in York. Before we start, I'd just like to have a minute silence for PC Rosie Pryor and Ryan Welford, who were killed on the A19 on Saturday, the 11th of January. So if we're happy to conduct that minute silence, we'll start now. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for that. What's our thoughts with everyone who was involved in that. So just please note this will be a live broadcast meeting, will be available to view on the Combined Authority YouTube channel, and please ensure that you use your microphones when speaking. I'd just like to start off by welcoming our new Director of Economy, Andy Kerr, who hopefully many of you have already met, but he's obviously come on to us at the start of this year. Thoroughly welcome his appointment, and he's already shown his worth already. So thank you very much, Andy, for the start you've already made. We'll move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Elizabeth?
Councillor Richard Foster, who is sending apologies.
Thank you.
Not a member.
From Richard Flinton as well. Thank you very much. That was it, I think, wasn't it? Thank you. Item number 2, which is the minutes of the meeting held on 8th of November. These are the minutes held. Members content with the minutes that are correct from that meeting. Nods all round. Thank you very much. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? None have been raised with me or you, Elizabeth. No, thank you. Item 4 is public participation. I don't believe there are any comments or questions. No, thank you very much. Moving swiftly on to item 5, which is Mayor's update, which is me. So just want to have a quick run over basically, because it's just been a couple of months since we had the last meeting back in November. So just a few things that have happened since then. We held our inaugural business board meeting, which thanks to members who were involved in creating that business board at the time. We had our first meeting back in November, which is bringing sector leads, experts right across our region together, which has been really beneficial, particularly developing our growth plans, our growth strategy going forward. And we've been engaging with those members ever since, also to link them up with key sectors that we're looking to highlight in our growth priorities as well. Great to see some of the feedback already from the business board and how proactive those members have already been, which is fantastic to see. So I welcome further engagement from them. We welcomed a delegation from HM Treasury to York Central, specifically to look at York Central within the wider context of the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority and our growth priorities, and how York Central is a real leading part of that. So that was a well-organised day. So thank you everyone involved in that, and members who were involved. It was really good to put York Central in the wider context of what York and North Yorkshire can deliver from York Central to HM Treasury. So that was wonderful to have that engagement. And we've had continued engagement with the Chancellor in Darlington a few weeks ago, and the Deputy Prime Minister in Leeds in December, and Sheffield just last week as well. Again, really going through what devolution in the white paper means for our region, and really emphasising our unique opportunities around York and North Yorkshire. Continued engagements with Nestle in York, geothermal demonstrator site in Kirby Misperton, which I always pronounce that incorrectly, so I do apologise to anyone in Kirby Misperton if I pronounce it incorrectly, and a few other key businesses in our region, such as Tofu in Malton. We had our first Remembrance Sunday as Mayor, which I attended in Richmond, which does seem a long way back then, but I just want to thank the people of Richmond, everyone involved in that. It was a wonderful day and a really lovely service that was conducted over there. Launch of the devolution white paper, which obviously is a real significant piece of government legislation and movement from taking powers away from Westminster and really emphasising the more powers onto into mayors and strategic authorities. I think it's safe to say when our combined authority was set up a couple of years ago, it maybe not have been set up in a line for where combined authorities are going now, but the extra powers and resources and potential of combined authorities are really exciting opportunities for our region. So we will continue to engage with government on that as well. And the potential it has to really deepen devolution and powers, particularly for our region around, health, housing, skills, and our direction to get to net zero. I just want to say a big thank you to our emergency services and the work that both councils have done and local authorities have done, particularly around the flooding impacts we've had over the last couple of months as well, which has been hugely impactful on our people. We've only seen it this week again. So big thank you to both authorities who've done a huge amount of work in there, and the local services, our emergency frontline services. So that's thank you personally from me to them on that. So that's a brief update from me. We'll move on to item number 6, which is going to be presented by Andrew Leeman, Head of Strategy, which is the Key Route Network for York and North Yorkshire. This collates both the Key Route networks from City of York and North Yorkshire Council into a single regional KNR, and it really sets out the basis for highways in York and North Yorkshire. So I'll hand over to you, Andrew, and then we can take any questions that might be needed on that. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you. So as the chair said, this is a report that sets out a key route network that covers York and North Yorkshire, which has primarily been brought together in consultation with the two local authorities. The two local authorities have been through their own committees to determine what those routes are, and the plans attached set out the routes with the table, including what road network are included within the key route network. This was a key part of the original devolution agreement in terms of the combined authority agreeing a key route network as part of overall road networks. So obviously, if you look at the main A roads, they're part of the National England road network, and then we've got the key route network, and then other primary routes within that context. So this is very strategic in terms of what we want to achieve as York and North Yorkshire, and the role of which will come into more detail as we go through. This is very much just to agree that network at this stage. So the plans were attached in the appendix with the list. Just to note that an earlier version of the report had a plan that included the North Yorkshire one, but it also included some parts of the York which were incorrect on the York plan. But Appendix 2 clarifies exactly where the York routes are. So the plans are there, and the plans have now been amended as part of the papers. So any questions?
Thank you, Andrew, for that. Any questions? Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Andrew, and thank you to your team and also the local authorities for all the work that they've done on this. Just to put it on the record, I know you've already alluded to it, but to put it on the record that in Appendix 3, the key route network that sees it extending all the way into central York actually stops pretty much on the boundary of the outer ring road and the A64. So that appendix, the map in Appendix 3 is, I think, the original, the version that we've got, the original iteration that has been corrected in Appendix 2. Appendix 2 is the correct map. So I just wanted that on the record for the minutes. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kilbane. Any more questions for Andrew on that? No. So recommendations can be found on page 14 of the agenda pack. Recommendations to be a mover and a seconder.
Proposed.
Thank you. I'll second it. And if we can move to a vote on that, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew, for that. Thank you, members. Sorry. Item 7 is the Mayoral General Budget and Precept proposal. This paper sets out the proposals for the Mayoral General Budget and Precept for 25-26. This proposal is exclusively for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. Members will be aware of the financial context of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service from the report details that's been provided. It's fair to say that we don't take these decisions lightly around increasing Precept, but we have to find there is responsibility to ensure that safety and financial security and safety of our fire and rescue service, and that's a key priority for me as Mayor. Alongside Deputy Mayor Joe Coles, we have written to government to raise this and ask for a long-term funding settlement, and just around the how we are as a fire and rescue service funded, particularly some of the unique challenges we have around flooding, for example, which we've seen an increase in that over recent times, potentially wildfires, the increase of population that we have into our regions during key times such as the summer, the amount of roads, for example, we have, and the amount of service that we are asking from our fire and rescue service. I will just invite Deputy Mayor Joe Coles to just make some remarks on this, as well, as Joe does lead on this and has been heavily involved in this, particularly with the police, fire and crime panel. So Joe, if I could invite you to come in, please, that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for allowing me just to briefly talk through the Precept proposals. I wanted to thank the staff in my teams for their work on the Precept consultation process, which has managed to both increase the number of people who participated in that process and also simultaneously reduced the cost of the consultation process itself at the same time. I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank Combined Authority members in previous years for the efforts that they have made, not in this forum, but through the Police and Crime Panel, to try and get action from government to address some of the issues that we have been facing, particularly with, as the Mayor has set out, the funding for the Fire and Rescue Service. Councillor Les, I know, thank you, last year you wrote to the Secretary of State, which preempted the Mayor and I taking a similar approach this year to ensure that we were picking up some of those issues around, as your letter said, significant concerns regarding the precarious financial position that the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service had been in for a number of years, and the constraints being placed on the Commissioner and then Mayor's ability to levy a precept that would adequately support the service. As your letter set out this time last year, that we would obviously within the service continue to identify savings, but that North Yorkshire remained an outlier, particularly around fire and rescue services across the country. Funding was limited, and our reserves, as the Mayor and I are aware, that we inherited were particularly worryingly low due to a cumulative impact of underfunding. The fire precept, as people may be aware, but the fire precept was actually frozen between 2011 and 2014, which led to what would now have been a £21 million additional funding in those fire budgets, which we have not had, which has led to some of those challenges that you set out in your letter last year, and we have set out again this year in terms of those investments for long-term sustainability of the service, and depleted reserves, which had got to a point now where we would have been at risk if we weren't intervening with the precept this year of not being able to respond in the way that we would have wanted if there'd been a major event. For example, if the Barcelona type flooding had happened here, or wildfires that we've seen in other parts of the world. If we'd had anything like those kind of scales of events, we would have been in a particularly difficult position. Just to set the scene, across the two forces, I know that this is predominantly an issue for the fire and rescue service, but the policing precept that will also be on people's council taxes, 45% of the budget of the police comes from the precept, but for fire it is 60% of the budget that comes from the precept. So it is a particularly important element of funding for the fire and rescue service. As the Mayor has just said, we don't currently receive any statutory funding to respond to flooding incidents. Notwithstanding that, our fire and rescue service do continually respond, obviously, to the public across York and North Yorkshire to incidents of flooding. And along with the Fire Brigades Union, we have made further representation to ministers to address that national flood resilience requirement that we know we would like to see our fire and rescue service adequately funded to respond to. Having said all of that, the changes that are set out in the paper will enable us to reduce the risk and vulnerability that our communities are exposed to. The Fire and Rescue Service will be able to increase the prevention and public protection work that the service already undertakes. It will enable us to increase collaboration, and already the Combined Authority is working, particularly with the Fire and Rescue Service, but also with police colleagues on estates projects, for example, which would be opportune places for collaboration. We, as I said, are ensuring that the service is able to adapt to those changing risks in demand, particularly from environmental changes, but also from our ageing population and increasing vulnerabilities in those communities. And also, again, as the Mayor set out, from the visitor populations, 20 million visitors into York and North Yorkshire each year. And we have to ensure that we keep all of those populations safe too. The proposal set out in the report will enable us to impact onto the reserves, in particular for the Fire and Rescue Service, which have become particularly concerningly low, and give us a secure financial footing that will enable us to invest in the infrastructure that we need. That is the position that is set out in those papers today. Thank you again for the opportunity to set out those issues to you, and the efforts that I know the Mayor and I will continue to make to ensure the Fire and Rescue Service has the funding and reserves that it needs to keep everyone in York and North Yorkshire safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'll now just lean over to Mike Russell, Section 73 Officer, to set out the paper.
Thanks, Chair. I'll keep this fairly brief because Deputy Mayor's covered some of the operational points around fire. Just as a technical point before I present the paper, at paragraph 1.2, there's a factual inaccuracy around the reference to West Yorkshire Combined Authority having in-house fire. Actually, it was the police that transferred to West Yorkshire Combined Authority, not with the fire. So we are alone with Greater Manchester with fire. Just a correction before we go into the detail. So, as has been mentioned, this is the presentation of the Mayor's general budget, and the Mayor's general budget is the budget for the specific powers that vest on the Mayor, not specifically with the Combined Authority, and typically those powers are those that are supported by Precept, levy or other forms of taxation. The wider Combined Authority general budget will be presented on the 7th of February alongside the final approval of this budget. The process for approval of this budget follows a separate statutory process, which is outlined at Appendix 5. But the purpose of this meeting is to allow the Mayor to discharge the responsibility of presenting his budget before the statutory deadline of 31st of January and allow members of the Combined Authority to comment upon that before it is approved subsequently. Those recommendations are detailed at paragraph 2. Just following up, the Deputy Mayor for Police, Fire and Crime has outlined the current financial position of the fire service. I think one aspect of the financial position that wasn't covered alongside the levels of reserves and the fact that there was a historic Precept freeze is the fact that the service has a high level of borrowings. Currently, there are around £17 million of borrowings in the service against an income of 45 million. So that's 38% of revenue in borrowings, which is high. And the service is currently, without this Precept change, required to borrow for all capital items, including IT, as well as long-term things in estates. What has not been mentioned previously is the funding settlement for the service has been a difficult one this year. In expectation terms, around 1.4 million of revenue has been lost due to a loss of the Rural Services Grant and the Services Grant and Funding Guarantee. That is a 1.2 million reduction in cash in real terms. Alongside that loss in funding, there have been a number of cost pressures, typically linked to staff, which are summarised in the report, but overall total around £4 million year on year. That's against a backdrop of a challenging increase in scope of services linked to the things that the Deputy Mayor mentioned previously in the context of potential risk of wildfire and flooding. The need for investment in the service is also clear and has been pointed out for a number of years in terms of it has aging fleet of appliances, some of which are 15 years old, and this plan addresses the investment in that fleet moving forward. And also core breathing apparatus is proposed to be replaced. Currently the breathing apparatus does not include telemetry or any sort of location tagging on fire officers. So that's a key safety consideration to take forward. And there's also investment needed in the wider service to support future development and build in future efficiencies. The solution to that is that the Mayor is using his flexibility to raise the Precept at the level he sees appropriate, which is to, it's now £107.02 for a Band D property. That is a £24 increase on the previous year's fire and rescue Precept. What that will cover is the 1.4 million of expected funding losses that we mentioned previously. Cover those cost pressures, the £4 million increase in the cost base, allow the service to improve its general reserves position, which are currently 3% of income to 5% of income, and allow £1 million a year for 4 years in accordance with the assumptions of the medium-term financial plan to be set aside for wider capital investment to improve efficiency in the service and meet wider needs. As the Deputy Mayor mentioned, there's been public consultation around the proposed Precept increase, which has been largely supportive. And also the service continues to seek savings in line with its operational plans. And this plan includes £400,000 of non-pay savings in year. It's been identified that there's been limited or no scope for pay cost savings as pay settlements are nationally negotiated for the service, and therefore any real reduction in pay costs for the service would lead to a reduction in service to the communities. That overall gives an outline of the position. At that point, I'll open that up to any questions and comments from the committee.
Thank you very much, Mike. Any questions? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just ask, can you summarise what the major results from the consultation were? I assume that people were asked, would they want to see investment in the service or not, Precept or not, or etc. Thank you.
So in the interest of transparency, it is quite often difficult to get people to buy into these consultations, but we have had what we consider as fairly strong response of around just over £2,000 residents in the region. That those residents were selected to give a good demographic cover. Initially, the Precept offered 3 options. It was a £6 increase, a £15 increase, and a £24 increase. The £6 increase was designated initially as a very much a standalone position, so the service would retain all the challenges it had seen, but the finance lead for the service had determined that he thought at the time that that would allow them to balance their budget, but just carry forward issues into subsequent years. The £15 and the £24 were various options around investment in the service and moving it forward. The funding settlement for fire was announced immediately prior to Christmas, which led to some of the issues that were described in the report around the funding reduction. And that led to an update to the consultation whereby the public were made aware that the £15 level of Precept would likely only cover the service's bare minimum operating costs, and that the overall investment would probably need to increase to allow the service to move forward. The results of the overall survey were broadly a third across the 3 options. Obviously the higher 2 options were largely submitted in the context of the service seeing investment. So it was considered that that was a reasonably strong backing from the public who were surveyed, that they supported investment in the service.
Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Dad.
A few questions, really. If we hear about a lag in, first of all, I've got to say the case that's been put is a compelling, strong case by the Deputy Mayor. I don't doubt that for one moment. But we've got a lag in terms of Precept. Can you tell me what the Precept would have been had the precept being raised instead of being frozen between 2011 and 14, I think it was.
So the impact estimated on where the precept would have been, and I think it assumes that the maximum available precept had been accessed by the fire authority, would have been £5 higher than it is currently.
I do accept though with that though that we'll have lost that accumulated
So-
£20 odd million for investment.
Yeah, so that
and
is
all
the
the rest of
impact
it.
of the
So-
loss of that growth over the 10 years since last freezes.
Can you also, and I'm got to say, I declare an interest in this as the member that promoted and introduced to the chamber the second term's premium. By my estimation, if we've got a council tax base increased of about 5,600, I think it was, properties at roughly £100 precept, is it fair to say then that the fire service will benefit before we come to budget calculations to a bonus, Bruce's bonus, call it what you want, of about £500,000?
So the impact is based on the numbers that are presented for this year is around between £500,000 and £600,000.
Oh, a bit more, bigger bonus then.
But that is obviously baked into the numbers that are in there and assumes the increase. It would
Absolutely,
be lower
before
last
we move
year's
on,
rate.
but without that second term's premium, would have been looking at a further £500,000 or £600,000 shortfall that would have had to have been covered by precept.
But it's the other way around. Potentially the precept would have had to have been higher to cover that. amount.
Exactly,
Would have-
that's what I'm driving at. But if we turn to 5.8 onwards, if we take into account rural services delivery grant at 700,000, take into account the loss of the minimum funding guarantee at 670,000 in round figures, there's a little bit from the loss of services grant at 43,000, national insurance funding as a result of the budget at 265,000, and the fire pensions grant at 180,000. We are in excess of a hit, are we not, post budget as a result of the government's announcements of £1.8 million? That's fair to say, isn't it?
that is based on those categories you've identified, that is the broad.
And then moving on from that, we consulted on £15 that would have given us some movement forward into restoring the lack of a credible budget for the service to have to consider a £24 increase. That's fair to say as well, isn't it?
Well, I think the consultation was on the basis that we would be somewhere between the 15 and 24 for the investment. I think if you were to do the broad brush maths.
Can I ask then what the £1.8 million would equate to if we had not taken that hit from government? What precept could we have foregone to cover that?
I think based on the high level maths I've just done, probably around £5.
£5. So it's cost the budget and the funding settlement for the bits that I've listed is costing each and every household in this region £5.
In Band D, obviously there's a range.
In Band D, of course, there'd be more, yeah, but we do talk about Band D stuff. So I suppose then, could I ask the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, as well as making the representations that you have as regards the historic lack of funding, and that come from a previous government, I accept, and the one before that, by the way, it is historic. Would you be minded to make representations ahead of a spending review that's predicted to be next year? Because my biggest fear is that this will not stop this year. We are planning or suggesting that we would only need, was it a 6% increase next year? I fear if a spending review is driven solely on deprivation by the government, we could be looking at more. Now, deprivation is something that exists within North Yorkshire and York. We all know that. We only need to look at the some of the inner town wards of Scarborough, for example, some of the wards in Selby, and certainly one or two areas within the, what's sometimes dubbed the beautiful market town of Thirsk, sometimes dubbed rich and leafy. Well, it's not. So we have deprivation, but if it's solely driven on deprivation, we will lose out. So would you join us in making them representations to government? Now, it's no good people around the table suggesting that the government are trying to defend the government in terms of they want to level up across the country and all the rest of it. Our duty is to York and North Yorkshire, and I very much hope we'll stick to that. I'm not getting involved in national drivers, but we have a duty to protect the taxpayer and the residents of this region.
Joe, would you like to come in first and then?
I just wanted to come back on a couple of those points, if that's okay. Just to say, yes, I mean, in terms of the changes to the precept, I mean, the hole in the budget because of the freezing of the precept between 2011 and 2014 caused a hole in the budget of £21 million. And that was one that the Police and Crime and Fire Panel had recognised in previous years, and representation had been made to government about that hole in the fire budget in particular, because the fire budget is so reliant on the funding from Precept. And the Mayor and I have already, just to answer your question, we've already made representation to the government, both about this year's fire settlement, but also about the longer term footing that we need our fire service in particular to be able to rest on. And that is the point I was trying to make in my remarks at the beginning around ensuring that there is proper recognition of environmental factors, of which we have probably a much higher level of demand across York and North Yorkshire than some other areas might have. So flooding, for example, no statutory national responsibility on the fire service to respond to flooding. We do it anyway, the service does it anyway, but we're not currently funded for it. And being able to get that recognised through the comprehensive spending review would make a big difference in terms of the fire budget for the longer term, but also things like the risks of wildfires and making sure that we've got a service that is able to do that. Are things that the Mayor and I have been talking about throughout, well, in the last 6 months since I came into post. This has been one of the main topics that the Mayor and I have been talking about, how to ensure that we put the fire and rescue service on the footing that it needs to be on for our people in York and North Yorkshire, to address the problems that have been made historically, but also to ensure that the service is able to put some money into its reserves to protect the service for the long term and ensure that we're keeping our people, the people of York and North Yorkshire, safe for the long term, which I think, Councillor Dadd, was the point you were trying to ensure that we were doing. We are trying to do that. This is the first opportunity that the Mayor has had to put forward a precept like this. We recognise that it is a difficult time for people across the country. We wouldn't do it if we didn't think the service needed it, but the service does need it, and the people need to know that when they need a fire and rescue service for whatever reason, that the service will be there for them, and we're determined to make sure that that investment goes in.
Thank you, Joe. And just to follow on, yes, we have already made representation to government on those points that Joe raised. And as we said, you know, fundamentally, this is about keeping not just our people safe, but the people who work in those frontline services safe as well. That's the priority. And I understand it is a difficult decision, but when it comes to keeping people safe and our blue light services, our frontline services safe, I find that a fairly easy decision to actually make. And I understand the financial strain that this will put on households, but I think, as Mike Russell pointed out, the consultation has been very thorough, over 2,000 results from that. The overwhelming majority were that 15 and plus higher. It's fairly even spread, but the 15 plus higher were the ones. And I think people understand they want to have their region safe for the people who live here and work here. But then we do have some unique challenges in our region, as Joe Colgan, Deputy Mayor, has pointed out, particularly around flooding, wildfires, the increase in people, the amount of roads we have, the increase in traffic we have into our region. So yes, a difficult decision, but one that needs to be made and to hopefully rectify some of the challenges we've had in the precept over the last decade or so. Councillor Dadd, would you like to come back?
Yeah, the thing, and I think we're all as one. We want to achieve the same aim as yourself, but it's not going to be helped. Now, come back to the Rural Services Delivery Grant. It doesn't just affect the fire service, it's affected, I don't think it's affected City of York, tell me if I'm wrong, but certainly the rural county of North Yorkshire. It's been an horrendous hit. And of course, without strong local authorities, we're gonna, you know, your services, by yours, our services, the fire service will suffer because they're intertwined. And I ask again, would you be willing to support North Yorkshire in its bid to ensure that the rural costs of delivering services that affect not just North Yorkshire, but the fire service and the police service are properly recognised by government. And the withdrawal overnight of 14 million quid to North Yorkshire Council of Rural Services Delivery Grant does nothing to help that case.
I mean, we have, if I can come back, Gareth, that's okay, Councillor Dad, we have been calling for long-term funding settlements from government to have that long-term security for local authorities and for us as a combined authority. There have been challenging decisions made, but all local authorities for very long periods of time have had drastic decisions to make in terms of funding and challenges faced. York and North Yorkshire are in that, as are so many other local authorities. Our point from being a combined authorities is having that overview of York and North Yorkshire, working collectively and bringing that long-term funding settlement into our region to be able to support both local authorities as best as possibly we can do, under challenging circumstances. And I understand where you're coming from, but our job as a combined authority is to work with obviously government, work with partners and get that long-term settlement so we can have a secure future going forward for both as a combined authority and particularly for our services. Joe, did you want to come back in on?
Sorry, just one final point that I forgot to make. One of the other issues that has been particularly worrying, which Mike Russell touched upon when he was talking, was the situation regarding the Fire and Rescue Services reserves currently. So the reserves were at 5.8 million at the beginning of this last financial year in March 2024. They are estimated to be down at 3.7 million at the start of this financial year. That is not a sustainable level of reserve for the Fire and Rescue Service to ensure that we've got the protection within there to make sure that that service is there. If we do have an exceptional incident, we need to have reserves that are available to us. And so the proposal, which is in these papers and which will be going to the Police, Fire and Rescue panel, is to increase those reserves up to 11.5 million by 2029, which is the kind of level of reserves which the has been deemed to be a kind of safe level for that fire and rescue service with the budget that it currently has. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Joe. Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Coles, I think you might want to check the figures for the number of visitors that you quoted. I think it might be higher than, I think you were quoting 22 million. I think York and North Yorkshire get a higher number of visitors than that. And obviously, we'll need to make sure that we've got our figures right as we make our representations to the government to get the best deal that we can for York and North Yorkshire. Appreciate where Councillor Dad is coming from. Appreciate also in pointing out that of the £24 increase, that of course none of us want to be in a position where we're having to make this decision, but if we want a fire and police locally that respond to the needs of our communities, then unfortunately this is the position that we're in. Appreciate Councillor Dad pointing out that £19 of the £24 increase comes from the austerity that we suffered under 13 years of Conservative rule. But if we're in that game, then, you know, happily point that out to any residents that are paying attention. Had it not been so underfunded, then clearly we would not be in this position. But of course, we will clearly make representations to government about the uniqueness, particularly the geography of the region that we all represent. And Mayor and Deputy Mayor, I wish you more success in those discussions with government than clearly the Conservative leadership had in the previous 13 years.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. Any more? Oh, would you like to Councillor Les?
I was going to wish Joe more success than we had with the letters that we wrote. I think there's sometimes a disconnect between writing to ministers and talking to Westminster and talking to Whitehall. And I think quite often the blockage comes in the comprehension in Whitehall of the situations that we find ourselves in, and I'm talking particularly from North Yorkshire, so in a rural area. I think it's sometimes difficult for people who live in the home counties to understand our version of rurality compared to the rurality of Surrey.
And if I could just follow on from that, Councillor, if I may, we welcome the work that you have done previously in trying to contact into government and to raise this issue. And as Joe Coles pointed out, letter that I think you sent last year, and obviously we followed up in similar vein. Just touching on the rurality while we're talking about that element, it's a constant that we are raising as a combined authority to government, not just around this area, but around how we deliver, say, homes, transport, skills, everything in our region is incredibly challenging because of the rurality and the coastal element of it. We see that as a great opportunity, though, because we have that uniqueness. And if you look at the combined authorities coming on from May onwards this year, they're much more in our vein than they are from a city centre such as Manchester, London and Liverpool and others. And I think we see it is quite a unique opportunity that we can show how you can deliver devolution and create a combined authority in a rural context. That message is certainly getting through to government. The conversations we're having now are much more geared around how we support you in a rural context, around transport, around delivery of homes. So it is a message that we are getting through, and I think it is a challenge for us because of the geographical nature and the size, let's be honest. But I think it offers us quite unique opportunities. We've seen for our growth plan, our potential around some of our unique opportunities. It actually puts us on a front step in certain areas, but it does bring up unique challenges, which I don't have to tell you. Councillor Les, obviously been heavily involved in North Yorkshire for a long time. Those challenges are quite unique, but looking at the combined authorities going forward, they are going to be challenges that are going to be faced nationally, and we can be ahead of the curve on it and hopefully try to show how a combined authority can deliver in a rural and coastal context, not just in an urbanised city centre. So thank you for your points there, Carl. Councillor Les. Councillor Dad.
Sorry, and then I will wrap up, so to speak. £24 equates to 29%. A nod will do. That's what we're asking, is it not? I wish 29% had been put in the papers, because, you know, I very much hope that we're going to be open and transparent about this. It's a hard ask, given the cost of living crisis that was going to be resolved and all the rest of it, but a necessary ask. I accept that. But what I would like to do is ensure, or ask the Mayor, how we ensure that that extra income investment is deployed. Perhaps we can request that scrutiny in the police and crime and fire panel look at that, but I would like to think that we have oversight of it in the public forum in due course at the appropriate time to make sure that they're on track. And we hold their feet, by they, I mean the fire services feet to the fire in terms of efficiencies, because I can't believe that there's no more administrative efficiencies to find. It happens all the time. We have AI, we have technology. So the challenge has got to be there. It's too easy, isn't it? Now we've got the ability to raise a precept unfettered, you know, with no cap on it. Too easy to turn to Joe Public and just put our hand out. With that comes a responsibility to make sure it's been deployed properly. And I hope that's something that we can all agree on.
I'll just bring in Joe Coles on that, because he's just got a little bit more information of where that will go, and then I'll come back in on that if that's okay.
Yeah, just to reassure you, Councillor Dad, that came up already at the Police, Fire and Crime panel, and absolutely those efficiencies are at the forefront of our mind. The £24, by the way, is 46 pence a week for council taxpayers in terms of the actual amount, and that was explained as part of the consultation process. Not that that makes it any less, it just makes it an amount that people can understand. But it is fair to say that we need to continue to look for efficiencies. However, I think the history, particularly with the Fire and Rescue Service, is that they have been under the cosh with their budgets, as Councillor Les will know because he was chairing the Police, Fire and Crime panel until a year ago. Those efficiencies have been driven within that service. The fact that the reserves are down at the level that they are, dangerously at the level that they are, points to a level of focus that there has been within that service. The age of the engines and the appliances that firefighters are having to use. I was at Selby Fire Station 2 weeks ago, which is one of the more modern engines, but it still wasn't state of the art in terms of the equipment that you might find in a more urban fire and rescue service. So we do need to drive those efficiencies. I'm absolutely with you on that, in the police service and in the fire and rescue service, absolutely with you on that. But I think particularly in the fire and rescue service, because they have been under this for now since 2011. So these issues have been with them for now nearly 14 years. I think they have driven a lot of efficiencies, and we've reached the bottom of those efficiencies, and it is now the point where we have to put some proper investment in, which the Mayor and I have been determined to do. But by all means, please continue to monitor the way in which those budgets are being spent. I absolutely will be doing that, particularly with the fire and rescue service. But I think that they have been under a huge amount of pressure, and it's been reflected in the inspection processes that the fire and rescue service has been under, just how difficult it has been for that service to respond over such a large geographical area. And it is therefore really important that we get that investment in and then continue to monitor the progress that the service is able to make. But thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And I think just another point on that as well is having investment into the service now will make it easier to find those efficiencies and become more of an efficient service as well. So having that investment now short term will be able to lead to those further down the road as well. Councillor Dunn?
Sorry to labour the point, but I take it from that then that you'd be quite happy once overview and scrutiny and police and crime panel have done their word in terms of monitoring progress and the capital plans and all the rest of it at the appropriate time for us to have an overview paper back to this combined authority.
Yeah, I'd be
because I
happy
think
with
we
that.
have a duty to, given we're asking for 29%.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that. And obviously you have the police fire crime plan as well, which that will be going through obviously as well as in time. Any more questions for anyone? Okay. So recommendations on page 23 of the agenda pack. And we have a mover and a seconder on those there.
Moved.
And to a vote there. Thank you. Thank you very much. Agenda item 8 is the business innovation programme, which will be report by Head of Delivery Liz Philpott. Just like to say a little bit, we really welcome this report actually and the engagement with Innovate UK to co-produce this local action plan. And it will also launch alongside the Business Innovation Fund as well. So really showing our commitment from the Combined Authority into business innovation right across York and North York. So a really exciting piece of work. So thank you, Liz. If I can hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Business Innovation Programme is going to be key to creating the right economic conditions across York and North Yorkshire to drive growth that we are working towards, not only in the region, but at a national level. It's complementary to the local growth plan that was submitted to government before Christmas, which Andrew and his team are working on and that people have contributed to. That's being developed for a final version to go in to government fairly imminently, I think. So this underpins really how we deliver that economic growth in practice. So business innovation has been designed in our plan to support the government priorities of building long-term stability for business, using the mobilising powers of national and local government to create free and fair trade conditions and an easier investor journey. And an important strand of this will be skills and workforce development to respond to the opportunities that sit within the region and further afield. So to develop this piece of work, we've formed a close relationship with Innovate UK, which is the government's specialist body that support innovation across the nations and regions. In section 3.4, I've highlighted what innovation comprises: creative ideas, new products, efficiency, productivity, profitability, competitive advantage, technological advancements, resilience, and supporting and attracting and retaining talent. So all of those components, I think it's easy to see how they will help us to drive growth and economic prosperity. I've highlighted in section 4.5 of the report the work that's been going on so far, and that's in 5 broad work streams. One is baseline research, because to be able to measure how significantly we've developed innovation and business growth in the region, we need to understand what our starting position is. So that's been going on over the last 4 to 6 months. We've also done some work on opportunities for internationalisation and exports, which will be a major part of driving growth and helping businesses to embark on exports and international trade if they're not doing so already, or finding new markets if they're already in that arena. As we've said, the partnership with Innovate UK is working towards establishing an action plan, and that's really critical for us as a combined authority, where we only formed a year ago, and we've only had an elected mayor since May. So we want to get that Innovation UK action plan in place and have it launched by the 20th of March is the planned date. And that puts us on a similar footing to the other more mature combined authority areas. Tees Valley and West Midlands have already had theirs signed off and launched previously. And I've put a couple of links in there just so that people can see what that might look like moving forward. But what's going to be even more important to be able to move things sooner rather than later is the Business Innovation Fund that the Mayor has committed to offer £5 million from the Mayoral Investment Fund over the next 4 years through to March 28. And that will enable a whole range of activity to be supported to actually deliver the proposals that are set out in the Innovate UK action plan. It'll also help us to lever further support from Innovate UK, where they're already working across all areas of England. What we found from some of the analysis is that we are underrepresented in accessing those funds at the moment. So it's our absolute intention to mobilise and try and bat at least at our fair share of what might be available. And a key part of that, we will be working with business, industry and universities to be able to take those research and development activities forwards in partnerships with business. So in section 4.7 of the report, it sets out the process that we're working towards to the launch of the Innovation Action Plan for our region. And also in section 4.8, the scope of activities that the mayoral investment funding for business innovation might be able to support. It's still very much work in progress, but it at least gives you an idea of some of the things that we'll be expecting to launch moving forward. Also, just to bring things to a close, in section 5, we've highlighted there some of the consultation and engagement activities that we've been working on. And it is quite a fast track process that we've brought this work forward through just before Christmas, and we're intensively progressing that at the moment to bring things to a conclusion and launch the plan in March. And that's a deadline that we've agreed jointly with Innovate UK to meet their timescales for their resources working with us, and then obviously they'll have other areas to move on to across the country. So hopefully that gives an overview as well as taking the report as read. I'll be happy to answer any questions and then hopefully we move on to the recommendations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Liz. Any questions for Liz on that at all? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to welcome this coming forward. I think we all know that our statistics within York and North Yorkshire on business creation and innovation don't actually reflect the level of expertise and education that we currently have, and we should be punching far higher than we are. It's a real potential growth area for us that I'm really keen to see us drive, keeping more of our graduates in our region, because the businesses that can employ them in innovation and skills, businesses of the future, come to our region. So whatever I can do to support this and see the prosperity of our York and North Yorkshire increase, I'm more than happy to do so. Thank you to the team and Mayor for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Douglas. And I think a really key one is it's not just having a plan, it's actually having an investment fund behind it to go deliver said plan. I think we can all put plans together and strategies, but now being in this, not unique, but in an opportunity for the combined authority to have a funding pot next to it as well. So we can not only put the plan, we can actually then go deliver it out into the public and into our region. I think it's the key element to it. So Liz and the team, thank you so much for putting all that work together. It's been a huge amount, and the amount of stakeholder engagement, which continues to be something that the combined authority, I think, does really well. I welcome that work. So thank you very much, Liz, on that. If there's no more questions for Liz there, recommendations can be page 49, recommendations to move and a seconder. And a vote on that, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Liz, for the work on that as well, and the team, David Ryan, everyone as well. Item number 9, the Combined Authority Governance report by the Monitoring Officer. Sorry, Rachel Antonelli.
Thank you. Members, this report is in 2 parts. First, relates to a proposed amendment to the constitution of the Combined Authority, and the second part deals with the recruitment of the independent member and independent person. Taking you first of all to the first part, which relates to the constitution. There's been a staffing change within the Combined Authority, which has led to a need to review the scheme of delegation within Part 9 of the constitution. Officers have consulted with the Audit and Governance Committee in accordance with the constitution of the Combined Authority. There've been no comments that I need to feed back to the Combined Authority today. A track change copy of the proposed amendments can be found at Appendix A. And it, in the main, brings the key delegations under either the Chief Executive or the Monitoring Officer. Going forward and looking forward, the Audit and Governance Committee has constituted the Constitution Working Group, who are looking at Part 9 at the moment, amongst other elements of the Constitution. So they'll be looking at that as a whole to ensure that it remains fit for purpose, which later this year I hope to be able to report back to yourselves on. In relation to the second part of this report, which relates to the independent member and independent person, members will be aware that the independent member's role is to support and strengthen the work of the Audit and Governance Committee. Independent person's role to advise on member code of conduct matters. The relevant legislation for those 2 roles can be found in paragraphs 4.2 and 4.3. So the Local Government Act and also the Localism Act. In respect of the recruitment process for which my team were tasked to undertake, the interviews were held in December 2024. The interview panel comprised of myself, the Head of HR and Director of Resources. A series of questions were asked to demonstrate, to weed out and find out the applicant's experience and expertise for the role. 4.6 at the top of page 53 sets out that the preferred candidate for the role of independent member comes with a wealth of local authority expertise and experience, having previously been a chair and also vice chair of a Combined Authority Audit Committee and Police and Crime Joint Independent Audit Committee. So they have a wealth of experience to bring to the table. The preferred candidate for the role of independent person for standards has got 10 years experience as a board member at director level within a public sector field. The recommendations are on the bottom of page 53 at paragraph 10. So 10.1, the first recommendation relates to approving the amendment of Part 9. And 10.2 relates to approving the appointments of the independent member, Stuart Green, and the independent person, Susan Giles. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Rachel, any questions for Rachel on that report? No? Oh, yeah.
Passing comment, just to say how pleased I am that we've got people of this calibre coming forward, given that, you know, they're certainly not motivated by any sort of salary attached to it, because it's pretty de minimis. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
And second that, and thank those people for stepping forward. It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd just like to thank officers for the work on this, and the independent member and Stuart Green and Susan Giles for taking on these roles. It's extremely much appreciated and shows our willingness to be open and transparent and work with everyone to improve the Combined Authority, and it's working. So thank you very much for that. Can we have a move and a seconder? Yes. Yes.
Seconded.
Vote. Vote on that. Gareth, put your hand up. Gareth. Thank you very much, gents. Thank you very much, Rachel, for that piece. Item 10 is the forward plan. Members happy to take the report as read, taken us up to 28th of February 2026. Paul Clark is in the room if we'd have any questions for the forward plan at all. Paul, if you'd like to point anything out in particular on that.
I won't comment on the version that's circulated because members have all had sight on it. What I would say is we've had 2 items come forward since the papers went to print. So there'll be 2 additional items on the March meeting. Those are next year's UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which will be for acceptance of the funding, and the 25-26 delivery plan. And there'll be another report on the Combined Authorities transport functions, covering the bus service improvement plan and highway funding allocations, the Combined Authority transport resources, and the strategic transport framework.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Sorry, I was quickly trying to catch up when Paul spoke. Did I hear that the highways allocations are coming forward, and at what date? I'm particularly got a focus on the recent pothole fund that's been distributed. I think I'm right in saying through combined authorities for redistribution to local authorities.
I'm not sure. Is the highways on the agenda of March? Is that what you said, Paul? Sorry.
I only have the headline information at the moment. I can get further confirmation and get back to members.
We do know in that March meeting we do have a lot on that agenda. We can go away and confirm that with you if you like. Councillor, just confirm everything that's going to be on that agenda, because it is going to be quite a big meeting, the March one. So I can confirm if the highways pothole allocation is going to be on that.
Just, I'm aware that clearly local authorities will be planning ahead, so it'd be helpful to have that indication. I'll just say this now. Very much hope that the traditional formula of allocation is used in terms of mileage of road and the likes, and we're not going to alter that modus operandi, if you like.
Yeah, we'll have we'll get the information through to you. Obviously, what's going to be the March meeting at ASAP, and we'll just confirm the highways is going to be on there, and the papers and everything to align with that. I'd just like to say on the March meeting, I think it's a real positive that we have got some really busy meetings coming up. There is a lot on the March meeting. It shows how much the Combined Authority is really taking on, and there's going to be a lot more of that going forward. Oh, sorry, James. We voted on that, haven't we? Sorry. Sorry, I know on item 9 yet. Sorry. So thanks very much, Paul, for item 10. Item 11, urgent business. We have no urgent business as we stand. So I just thank everyone in the attendance and the millions at home that have watched. Next meeting will be Friday the 7th of February at 4 p.m. at County Hall in North Allerton. Thank you very much for your time and have a good evening.